Okay, so as it is Monday, you know what time it is. I'm joined by Jant Sports. We're here to talk about National Signing Day, some Alabama news, some Oklahoma news, and then just various college football talk. But Jance, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing great, man. Just chilling for the most part, man. Just ready to get into it.
So we can't have two Alabama fans in here and not talk about the news that broke today in regards to Alabama getting a new
Yes.
offensive line coach. So talk to me about your expectations there and what were your initial thoughts?
Well, first of all, man, when I heard that news, man, I said thank God. I said thank God. I like Brian Dable. I'm sorry, not Brian Dable. I'm thinking about the Buffalo Bills.
Doug
Thinking about that.
Marrone.
Yeah, but yeah, for the most part, I really like this hire. You're talking about a guy that knows how to develop players in the offensive line. Again, when you look at Doug Marrone and everything he did at the University of Alabama, and he brought a lot of NFL experience, but at the same time, this offensive line really they couldn't really get into that rhythm until late in the season, and we saw the national championship game. Yes, Georgia has a great defense, but again, we've had too many struggles with the Auburn game. You look at the A&M game, the Florida game, in the second, especially in the second half, how that was big of an issue. It was just too many games. The LSU game, too many games where it was just the offensive line was just way too inconsistent. We have way too many 4 and 5 star players for them not to just live up to their expectations. Alabama's is it's always known for their defense. I mean, more so lately, it's known for their passing attack, but the offensive line has been the heart for this team for over
Forever.
almost 2 decades, forever.
Right.
And the fact that we're getting an offensive line coach that knows how to develop talent, I mean, Darian Kennard, he might end up being a first round pick, and Kennard has talked about how much that this coach has really given him, and just had the process that everything happened there. So I'm really excited for this hire. I'm excited for it. I think our offensive line will get better from this, especially that now we're entering. Chris Owens is not going to be here. Emil Ekiyor is returning back. He had an off year after having an All American year back in 2020. So this is the perfect time for guys, for J.C. Latham, for Tommy Brockermeyer, for Terrence Ferguson, for those guys to be developed by a coach that has that reputation at the college level for getting the best out of players.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at it, what Wolford's been able to do at Kentucky has been great. I talked about it today in the video. The offensive line Kentucky had ranked as a top 5 unit through week 11 of the college football season. One of only 3 units, by the way, that posted a grade better than 78 in both the pass category and the run category. So this is an offensive line and an offensive line coach that knows how to get things done. Isaiah, thanks for joining us. No, thanks for being in here. Now, Isaiah asked, does this mean that Bill O'Brien is leaving for the offensive coordinator job at the Patriots? Who knows as that front goes, but the more time that goes along, the more likely I think that Bill O'Brien might have an NFL exit. What do you think, Gents?
I think, listen, if we get another hire, man, I think it might be. I mean, Doug. I mean, I don't think Nick Saban. He didn't announce that Doug Marrone was going to be off the staff. I don't think he announced it. But we all know what Nick Saban does. Yeah, we all know what Nick Saban does. He's not going to call out any names. He's not going to fire anyone publicly. He's going to try to find you a job. He's going to try to find you a coaching job somewhere else. So if we can get maybe another splash hire, maybe not for no, maybe not so them being labeled as the offensive coordinator, but if we have another big splash that's known for what they can do on the offensive side of the ball, I mean, it's safe to say that Nick Saban is going in a different direction. We all know Nick Saban is one of the best coaches when it comes to just innovating, when it comes to just really
Absolutely.
to just adapting. And I would not be surprised at all if this is going to be the last we see of Bill O'Brien. I would not be shocked at all.
Yeah, I tend to agree. As more time goes on, the more NFL openings that come about, I could see Bill O'Brien making that move back to the NFL, and it wouldn't be super surprising. Isaiah says they were talking about Wiggins as a candidate for the offensive coordinator position if Bill leaves. And look, this is what I will say: you don't want to lose Wiggins,
No,
right?
you don't.
Wiggins is, I mean, if you're not taking Wiggins as your wide receiver coach, who are you going to take? Brian Hartline at Ohio State? Like, that's really the only other answer I can think of. I really do like the hire that Georgia just made, McClendon. That guy is a really good recruiter, but even then, Wiggins, I mean, off the top of your head, Gents, who are you going to take over him?
I can't. Besides Brian Hartline, I mean, I don't know. Maybe you'll take some grad assistant coaches. I think that's the best thing that you can kind of do. But Nick Saban, if he's going to do that, I mean, we all know that he wants these coaches to develop 3-4 years down the line before they even get into the conversation of being a positional coach, especially in a very very important position that's been key and stable for the Alabama Crimson Tide over the last 4 to 5 years. So as far as like the hot names, the hot commodities go, I don't really see it. I think Holman Wiggins, he's been one of your better recruiters. He's been a great coach since he's been here. I don't see no, Nick Saban, I think, will try to do his best to retain a guy like Holman Wiggins back here.
Yeah, and even look, if I was to ask the question, who would you take as a wide receiver coach? The only other answer that even comes to mind that you could even make an argument to me for is Brian Hartline. And even then, I'm taking Wiggins, right? Now, maybe that's because I'm an Alabama fan, but one of them has a wide receiver that won the Heisman. That's huge. That's absolutely huge. So Wiggins to the offensive coordinator position, if that was the move, would be interesting. But I'm just intrigued that if Bill O'Brien is out, what the moves overall are going to be. Eric, thanks for joining us. He says Jaleel Florence to Oregon. And look, Oregon is going to be recruiting at a high level with Dan Lanning. I have no doubt that the recruiting isn't going to fall off monumentally. Now, is it going to be an adverse hit this year? Sure, no doubt about it. I think, Jance, we've talked multiple times how whenever you have a coach make that sort of exodus, it's kind of to be expected that you have a recruiting hit. But, Noah wants us to talk about some OU. No, we'll get to that right here in a bit because we have a lot to talk about in that department. But, Jance, when we're talking about Oregon recruiting in the future, what do you see then? Like, Lanning was a real hot name on the coaching market. Do you think that translates to recruiting fairly soon at Oregon?
I think it has to be because you can't take that step down of what Mario Cristobal did. Mario Cristobal did an exceptional job of recruiting, not just in that Oregon, that California area, that upper northern California area, which has been a big target for Oregon for decades. But that Southern California area, the fact that Mario Cristobal was able to go in there and dominate, like no other school came close to dominating the Southern California area, which holds some of the best high schools in the nation. You cannot take that step down. Now again, Dan Lanning is also a really good recruiter. That's a guy that knows how to attract prospects to come to a particular organization. I mean, just look what he did with Georgia. I mean, it's really, really incredible. We all know it's a great sound defensive mind. But I think the most important thing is that he has that SEC background. And from what we've seen so far from assistant coaches that have come from these SEC background schools, they typically are known to being really good recruiters. Look at the SEC rankings. There's a reason why you see 9, 10, 11 teams in the top 30 alone. Simply because of their recruiting backgrounds in the particular areas that they can go for. So I think with Lanning, there are areas that he is going to try to drag some players over to the University of Oregon, but you cannot take that step down. You cannot take that step down for Mario Cristobal did, especially with Lincoln Riley being at Oklahoma. You can't do it. You cannot do it there.
Yeah, you mean when Lincoln Riley goes to USC, now that he's in that division, you cannot take that step down. Absolutely cannot take that step down. And Eric makes a good point. He says, I think with Lapoy, we might have a better recruiting staff overall, too, to be determined. Eric, I tend to err on the side of like until results are shown. I'm a little bit cautious, but here's what I will say in your defense. There are names on that Oregon staff, and they recruit. They recruit at a very high level, and that area is just littered with talent. You do have an interesting hurdle in your way now in Lincoln Riley at SC because, to Jance's point, the area that has been of such importance to the Oregon Ducks is California, and now USC has a coach that is at least galvanizing that area. Now, how that ends up in the results category remains to be seen. It's a world of difference between what he inherited at OU compared to what he's getting at USC. But the point remains that he's already galvanizing California. How does that affect Oregon really remains to be seen. But I am intrigued. Eric, I'll tell you this right here. There's maybe nothing that excites me more in college football than the opportunity to see Justin Flo and Sewell play side by side.
Oh, man.
I mean, good
5-star duo, man.
That right there, I can't wait. Jance and I think almost every other time we stream, we drop one of those names, don't we, Jance?
Yeah, oh my God, when they're on the field together, man, it is.
They're
We only
great.
seen 1 or 2 games of it, and it was magical. I mean, you saw why those were 5 stars. You saw why Saban wanted both those players extremely badly, and I'm still sad that we could get one of those players. That is going to be tremendous.
Yeah, it's such a great duo. I'm interested to see how Dan Lanning is going to affect the defensive line recruiting. That's going to be an
Hmm.
area we need to keep an eye on. But getting Jaleel Florence was a massive win for the Oregon Ducks. Now, the thing I think is going to be interesting is who do you think has a better season now, USC or Oregon?
Oh boy. I
That's a
would
tough.
prob That's a tough one. I would probably say honestly, I think USC. I think USC is going to have it because I think the momentum is in USC's favor. I think with Oregon, with Mario Cristobal leaving,
Okay.
I think no Oregon fan expected him to leave. I think that for the most part, from what he was able, I mean, he established something that Oregon hasn't had since the Chip Kelly era. And the fact that Oregon was swinging towards the right direction, that they were starting to become recruiting giants. I mean, even during Chip Kelly's prime at Oregon, they were never the huge recruiting giants. USC and UCLA were still the top, and Stanford were still the top dogs there. So the fact that is now kind of going out the window there. Um, and I think with Lincoln Riley, all the momentum, you're starting to see a lot of the transfers, highly touted transfers, starting to go over to USC. And I think it's still going to be counting. I don't think this Lincoln Riley is going to be completely done. We still got spring, we got summer camp to kind of worry about there. And I think more talent will go to there. I will say this about Oregon is that just because Mario Cristobal left, they had some players transfer out. They still got that 4 and 5 star talent there from a couple of recruiting, even from last recruiting cycle, right? Some people look at this ranking and they say, well, they're 55th in recruiting. Well, just about a couple years ago, they had a top 10 recruiting class, and even last season, they still finished with with the number 1 recruiting class in the Pac-12. So I think overall wise, I think Oregon can make it competitive. I think they have a great shot to have the better season. But I think with USC, the momentum that's going to that program right now. Not to mention that I just don't see if that there's just that clear cut dominant program over there. I think USC has a great chance to definitely have the better season.
See, I don't disagree with anything you said, but for just keeping it interesting, I'm going to take the opposite approach. And there's not any areas where I can just argue what you said. Everything you said, very true. Here's what I will say. I think that Lanning is inheriting something better than what Lincoln is inheriting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when you look at the totality of circumstances, Oregon is in a bit better position right now than that of USC. Now, down the line, it's going to be very interesting to see because of what you said. Like, USC, they've got a long ways to go to rebuild, but here's the scary thing about USC is if they get to the point where they're close, you're talking about an area that is loaded with talent. Like Jance alluded to earlier in this stream, you're talking some of the best high schools in the entire nation right there. But as of next year, I'd take Oregon as to being better next year, but who knows what the future holds. I just think they have a better situation top to bottom, especially in terms of what they are left with. But here's where it gets interesting. Here's where it does get interesting, is if Caleb Williams ultimately goes to USC like so many people expect, that's where this all of a sudden gets to be a really intriguing conversation because Oregon, they got in a transfer quarterback, but Bo Nix is not the win that Caleb Williams is out the transfer portal. So that's going to be something we have to watch. Now, some people in here have asked about OU, and OU has had an interesting weekend. Noeen says thoughts on OU in 2022. Are we talking about the season? No, let me know down in the comments. But we are going to talk about some OU recruiting because with National Signing Day upon us, there are some big prospects for the Sooners left on the board. None bigger than the 2 offensive linemen, Josh Connerly Jr., Devin Campbell. Now, for you, Jance, what do you know about those 2 prospects, and what do you see them doing?
Well, Campbell is definitely the biggest prospect of them all. I mean, you're talking about a 5-star talent, top 5 positional offensive lineman. And I think it's between Oklahoma and Texas, right? For that, for his commitment.
For Campbell, it's between Oklahoma and
Yes.
Texas.
Yeah.
Texas has a longer relationship. OU's
Okay.
really come on strong here recently.
Okay, so yeah, that has to be a win for Oklahoma. I mean, you need that recruit. I mean, even though Brent Venables, I think, is doing a great job so far. I think he's This is why I keep saying I don't think Caleb Williams is going to be back at Oklahoma, because I just think Venables just doesn't care at this point. I think Venables wants to go. He wants his own stable. He wants his own core. He wants to try to build something. He wants to build that foundation. And Lincoln Riley leaving there and the mess that it was there, I don't think he really cares about that. So kind of the point being is that I think for Campbell, getting a guy like Campbell, I think makes a statement that Oklahoma is not going anywhere. I think it makes a statement that Oklahoma is still going to be considered a top program. I think even though I don't think a lot of people are going to write Oklahoma off, just last year, we were just talking, we were all talking about that Oklahoma could have been a national championship favorite, and now they're kind of just that.
I was wrong about that, but hey, I have no qualms in owning my error there. Like when you looked at the totality of circumstances, OU going into last year returned so much on defense. I understand, before someone posted down there, the defense wasn't a top 10 defense the year before, but they'd been improving from year to year, and drastic improvements. Maybe not in overall defense, but if you looked at certain categories, they were shooting up the rankings every year, and then ultimately it didn't happen. So I'm completely with you there.
Yeah.
Bedenbaugh is a guy we can never count out on the offensive line front, right? Bill Bedenbaugh, one of the better offensive line coaches in all of college football. But what makes this battle for Campbell so intriguing is not only are we having two bitter rivals going after a recruit, Texas OU, instant win in my book, right? Like anytime, it's the same chance for us when Auburn and Bama are going after like Reuben Foster, right? Instant win in my book as far as intrigue. But now you're talking Kyle Flood versus Bill Bedenbaugh. I mean, we're talking a heavyweight battle everywhere you turn in this recruiting. I don't understand how you couldn't look at a battle such as Campbell and think, this is why I love recruiting, right? Like, this is why I love recruiting. I think that right there is where so much intrigue lies. But it's not just Campbell. If I had to guess, I think Texas probably lands Campbell. And the reason being, they have such an established relationship with Campbell. He's an in-state guy, and we can't ignore what their NIL money has been doing, right?
Oh, the 50,000
plus the 100,000.
Oh,
so it's 100
too much, yeah.
Top. That's a tough thing to ignore when you're 18 years old, right? Like, and then I understand some OU fans can say, and rightfully so, might I add, but we have Bill Bedenbaugh. And you're completely correct. Bill Bedenbaugh, unbelievable offensive line coach. They have Kyle Flood. Now, Kyle Flood might not have the name as established as Bill Bedenbaugh, but go look at the results Kyle Flood has had, even at his time at Rutgers. This is a dude that can coach the offensive line, right? And now he has that at his disposal. That's where this gets really interesting. But they're also in it for Connerly Jr. Now, Jance, I don't know if you saw, Connerly is one of my favorite players in this class.
Yeah, 5-star.
I was really hoping Bama could get him. Yeah, 5-star offensive tackle. Really was hoping that Bama could get him. OU's in the running for him as well. So how do you think OU fares in that? And then I have a question for you after. Do you think that their work in the transfer portal could be disadvantageous in terms of getting these guys in an actual recruiting sense?
Well, I think for Connerly Jr., I think for either one of those, I think you make a great point about that. I mean, they're both 5-star players, and I think the Campbell one would be a bigger statement, me personally, just because I think it's your first win against your rival. It would be Venables' first win against that rival program, and I think all Oklahoma fans can agree that would just be kind of the talk of the town. But if you get Josh Connerly Jr., man, I mean, either one of those players, you get a 5-star talent. You have someone that could seriously make a statement for your program. And Ty, you know me, I keep talking about this. Venables is building that program for the SEC. He's not building that program, just for this year. He's building that program for the SEC. He knows what it's going to take for them to dominate, right? Even with that Lincoln Riley formula, and I think that even with Lincoln Riley's formula, Oklahoma can have a lot of success in the SEC. But if you want to knock off the Georgias, if you want to knock off Alabama, if you want to compete for national championships, you have to get through the SEC first. So building through the trenches, getting one of those two guys there for the trenches, very, very important for Brent Venables. And I think he knows that. If you look at Venables and what he's done, he'll straight up tell you, at his time at Clemson, that building the trenches first, getting ready for the Alabamas, building a team to beating Alabama, it starts up front on the defensive line. It starts up front on the offensive line. And I think that for the most part, getting one of those two prospects will be huge for Oklahoma to get.
I couldn't agree more. I don't know that they get either of them, but the fact that they've gotten back into the running, that was a great, great deal for Oklahoma, especially with everything that happened in terms of Lincoln Riley. The fact that they were able to get back into this running, huge. Now, Noeen has asked, I want to know your thoughts on the future of OU, and I can actually answer this while answering a question Eric has had, which is, what's the outlook for Oklahoma's offense? Who's going to be running it, right? I can kind of encapsulate all of this. So the interesting thing right now with Oklahoma and moving forward is, like Jant said, they're building for the SEC. That much is very apparent when you look at the hires they've made. It's very apparent that that's in mind. The future of OU is intriguing, Noeen, because it would have been very easy when Lincoln Riley left for USC to say, man, they might have a real down year. But you have to look at how Brent Venables has navigated not only recruiting, not only hiring, but most of all the transfer portal, which he has been advantageous in, to say the least. So OU, I talked about this with Chris Griffin of the Horns Down podcast last week. He asked me if I think OU could take a hit this year. And I said, yes, but I don't think in the way people will think, right? When I say take a hit, I think OU fans will think, or fans in general will think, they'll lose multiple games, multiple more than they would have otherwise. That's not what I mean. What I mean when are they going to take a hit is I expect any time a brand new coach is inserted into a situation for there to be growing pains. I think that's only natural. Jance, I think you'd agree with that statement,
Mm-hmm.
no? Yeah, okay. So I think growing pains would only be natural. But if you look around the Big 12, name me a better year where you could have had this quote-unquote rebuild year if you're the Oklahoma Sooners. Texas is still figuring everything out, right? They still have a lot to figure out. Good recruiting class, but they still have a whole lot to figure out. Then you look, Iowa State loses their quarterback. They're losing their running back. That's such a high percentage of their offense. They have some veteran guys returning on defense, but they still lose a lot of talent. Baylor brings some guys back. Baylor is probably the team you're looking at within the Big 12 right now to be the real threat to OU. But when you're looking at it in its entirety, you're sitting there looking at a situation thinking like, okay, if there was ever a year for us to go through this, it's this year, because the Big 12 is kind of favorable in that aspect because other teams are having their down portions. Now, as far as the future, what does that look like? OU's a blue blood. And I've always operated under the assumption, but for the most part, blue bloods will be blue bloods, right? Like, you might have a down time period, sure, but a blue blood is this established for a reason at this point, and a few down years isn't going to change that. As far as Eric's question, what's the offense going to be looking like? Eric, this is where it gets really intriguing, and if you ever have any extra time, my man, go watch some Ole Miss film. Really fun, the offense they ran. But Jeff Lebby comes into this situation with a very intriguing amalgamation of systems. He comes from the Art Briles system, which has been very successful in college offenses, but then was able to meld a lot of the Art Briles offense with kind of his own flavor of it, and then it went to Ole Miss, where he was under Lane Kiffin, and then this giant amalgamation of offense appeared. What he's going to be running for OU is going to be very intriguing. It's RPO based, but when we're talking route concepts, there's route concepts from a lot of different offenses sprinkled in it, right? I mean, we're talking West Coast. We're talking some more historic things as well. It's a very intriguing offense, but it is very modern day. So it's an RPO-based offense. I think when you look at the moves Oklahoma has made at quarterback, it makes absolute sense. Dillon Gabriel, a guy Jeff Lebby had success with at UCF, kind of a mobile guy. Jackson Arnold, kind of a mobile guy. Nick Evers, you get the picture I'm painting. So I think it was a great hire in that regard. So Oklahoma getting an up-and-comer in the offensive coordinator position, that's going to be interesting. That's kind of my spiel on the future of OU. Jance, I want to hear from you as well. What do you think?
Well, I would just say this: if a down year for Oklahoma is being 10th in 10th in the nation recruiting and having 10 transfers, I don't know what is. I mean, I think you make a good point. I mean, Oklahoma. I mean, are we really going to seriously believe that Baylor for the next 5 years is going to be that contender for a year on basis? I mean, I like Baylor. I like what Dave Aranda is doing with the program. I like how he's changing the culture,
I
the
just don't
foundation.
doubt Aranda, man.
Yeah, but
I just threw
I,
out a random.
I, I don't know. 10, 11. I mean, can he be that serious contender for a year on year basis? I got to see it. I have to see that. You know, Mike
Yeah.
Gundy with Oklahoma State, we all know what he can do. But for the most part, it takes around 2 or 3 recruiting cycles in order for him to kind of really deliver a contender for the Big 12 championship. And then
And
obviously you
you
just
lose Knowles.
and you exactly. Then you just touched upon with Texas. They're still rebuilding. They're still trying to figure some things out. And this might not be a year where Texas wins more than 8 games. I mean, 8 wins might be a great season for them this year. I can't believe we're even saying that about Texas, but that might be the reality looking at it. So I think for Oklahoma, if you're a fan, yes, are you contending for a national championship this year? Probably not. But are you still going to be in contention for the Big 12 championship? Absolutely. That's their down year. And that's something that Oklahoma fans should still be excited for because you have a brand new coaching staff. You get to see what you get to see what you're working with Venables, right? Everyone's talking about Venables, how he's a defensive mastermind, how he's a player's coach, how players want to play for him. Very similar to Dabo Swinney. Why over the years, why so many schools offered Brent Venables a head coaching job and he turned them down, right? We now finally get to see it. We now get to see what Levy's all about with Ole Miss as he's going to bring that RPO based offense. And again, you just mentioned it. So many different concepts that it's going to be ran there. And to bring in a guy like Dealing, that's why I think again Caleb Williams can just kick the rocks if I'm an Oklahoma fan because I have a person that already knows the system. I have a person that already has played flawlessly, that has dominated with the system that I'm playing with. Now again, is he going to stay for the long term? Probably not, and that's where you want a Caleb Williams. But if I can have other young talent, if I have other young guys that can sit behind Gabriel, that can learn the system, I think I would actually be more excited about that than honestly Caleb Williams, in my personal opinion. That's just me. But I think for the most part, Oklahoma brings in a lot of good talent from the transfer portal. You can't now, of course, you can't annually get 11, 12 transfers every single year. I think they have around 11 transfers. Eventually, you have to go back to really the recruiting aspect by getting those high school kids, those 4 and 5 star guys, dominating the particular areas that Oklahoma's been trying to recruit and try to develop there for the next 3 to 4 years. But they still have players in that transfer portal that can come in and start right at this moment. And for their down year, again, just for their down year, they're still going to be a contention for the Big 12 championship. I think that's something that if you're an Oklahoma fan, you got to be excited for.
Every other fan base, if you told them, I mean, not every other fan, we're a little bit spoiled being Alabama fans, right?
Yeah.
We're a little bit of the exception, not the rule. But if you tell almost any other fan base, like, hey, you just had all these changes, but when you look at the totality of circumstances, it's very reasonable to believe you could still be in a position to contend for a Big 12 championship. They're jumping over the moon. With everything that just happened, they are jumping over the moon. That's what I mean. And I think Jant summed it up beautifully when I say blue bloods will be blue bloods. He just happened to say it a lot better than I. We have A and Eric going back and forth about how they think USC or Oregon will do. And look, that's why I posed the question. Because there are genuine ways to look at that where you could argue USC will have a better season depending on the status of Caleb Williams. But it's also very easy to see where Oregon is in such a better position for a new coach to come in there because of the recent success, because of the more palpable culture as of now. That's going to be something we have to watch. Now, Eric asks here, is there a QB coach development vacuum? Obviously, Riley's gone. Does OU lose that status? Jesse answers saying Lebby has shown he can develop quarterbacks. I think there's a good chance OU doesn't skip a beat at QB. I'm going to meet somewhere in the middle, Eric and Jesse. Jesse, you're not wrong. Lebby had a great time with Matt Corral. There's no doubt about that. But he is also a very young guy. And so I'm not quite comfortable saying that there won't be a beat skipped between what he's able to do and Lincoln Riley is able to do. But I also think that that might not need to be the question. I think the question should be, if there is a beat skipped, is it going to be a beat that matters enough to make a difference? And that's where I don't think the answer is yes. I think that if there is a beat skipped, it's not really going to matter because your defense is going to be better. So many different things are still going to be fine. But Lebby was really good with Matt Corral. Lebby was very good with Dylan Gabriel. So Lebby has had a lot of success with quarterbacks. I just don't know that I can put him on that same level as Lincoln Riley quite yet. just because it is what it is. Now, one of the last things, gents, before we get out of here, because today's just going to be a shorter stream, let everybody kind of relax before the craziness of this week goes down. We're going to be doing more streams this week. One of the things we need to talk about is in this class of 2023 coming up, OU just lost a big piece in DeAndre Moore. DeAndre Moore, Los Alamitos kid, if I'm not mistaken, he plays with the quarterback for USC now, right? Or am I wrong in thinking that?
I think you could be right about that.
Yeah,
I'm not really too sure about that, but
yeah, play together.
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
almost positive. That right there is going to be interesting to see if he ultimately follows Lincoln Riley, follows Malachi Nelson to USC. Being a California kid, it's going to be interesting to see how that happens. But I can promise a lot of schools will be on him. As far as Alabama is concerned, I don't think there'll be any surprises on National Signing Day. Do you, Jance?
No, I would not be surprised. I will say this: I think for the most part for Alabama for the 2022 class, I mean, we could be done right now. I mean, we don't really need to go after everybody, but could we have a potential shocker where very similar to Kamar Wheaton or Jason McKellen, where we have guys that we have no idea that Alabama was going to go this hard for these players and get? Absolutely, I wouldn't be stunned at all if that happens. But Alabama could be done right at this instant, and there will be nothing to kind of complain about.
So we have we're gonna do some comments from the chat, and then we're going to get out of here. Cameron hops in and says, I see a much better team record and continuity with UT this season. I like what Sark is doing. This is an interesting topic, Cameron, and I want to pose a question to you. So, Jance, what did you say you thought was realistic for Texas this year? 8 wins?
I thought 8 wins.
Okay. So, Cameron, here's my question to you. If Texas goes out there and has an 8-win season, but the games they lose are competitive and they're playing good football through and through, what are your thoughts there? Because I'm not a Texas fan, but if I was a Texas fan and I at least saw a season where we were playing good football but lost, I could still easily see where we have a lot of growing to do. And I'm interested in hearing your opinion on this, Jance, but I also think that UT was a lot further away than people thought. Now, I know I talked about how I thought Sark was going to be great for them. I still believe that. But when I thought that they could have success last year, I thought that was indicative of the Big 12 more so than where Texas was. I think Texas has a ways to go, and we're seeing that. What are you thinking there, Jance?
Well, I think we need to see. I think I'm more generally concerned with what are the weakest areas about Texas's game, and this has been something that's been an issue for like the last 5 to 10, for the last 5, maybe even a decade. I need to see that offensive line be better. I need to see improvement from the offensive line. Now we saw a little improvement from Texas at our offensive line, but we need to start seeing some jumps. We need to, I think with Texas fans, you need to be optimistic about there. I think your defense definitely needs to get a lot better because that's always been a weakness for Texas area. So I think their defense needs to get better. We all know that they have the playmakers on the outside. We all know you have a spectacular running back with BJ with Robinson, but they were just way too dependent on Robinson, and he got hurt. They were way too dependent on that. So they need to see areas from the quarterback position, from the offensive, from having that stability at the quarterback position, for the stability on the offensive line. And it's going to be a young offensive line, but that needs to grow. You need to see something there in order for you to be optimistic about next year, for you to potentially have a top tier unit, especially with all that talent with 4 and 5 stars that you're bringing in, especially if you grab with Campbell.
Oh, God.
You got to see something there. So I think, again, if Texas gets 8 wins, I think that's good. But I think if they need to showcase, they need to showcase areas that Texas fans can be excited about moving into the 2023 season. Because they got the athletes. I mean, absolutely 4 and 5 star talent all across the board for them. But again, when you spend over $150,000, and who knows the other NIL deals that are going to be in the making, and for you to pretty much underachieve, that can't work out. It can't work out. I mean, Texas is a blue blood program. They need to really show the fans why you are so invested in this program, why they can believe that Texas can be a top tier program moving on forward for 2023, and their preparation for moving on to the SEC. So I think that's just my opinion, though. I think they need to showcase in particular position groups that have always been that's just always been the Achilles heel for this program. why Texas fans should be excited for them moving forward.
So, Jason, I think there might be a bit of a miscommunication. We're saying that right now, if Texas goes out there and gets 8 wins but plays quality football, that's much better. Our position is that we think Texas was in a much worse position than many people understand. Another thing you have to realize, when they were winning it with Herman, the Big 12 wasn't as deep as it is right now. Iowa State, much better. Baylor with Dave Aranda, much better. TCU is wishy-washy in a year, though they always play Texas well for whatever reason. That's kind of where we're at with that. So that's going to be interesting to see. We have someone saying, how do you see Texas doing against Alabama? Now, Cameron, I'm sorry, but this is where cover your ears, okay? Because, like I said, Jason, I think the reason we might have a bit of a miscommunication there, I think Jance contends that the culture of Texas was in a worse position than many people seem to understand. So as long as those signs are getting better, if you have a quality culture, better football on the field, better line of scrimmage, and you get an 8-win season, but you're looking at next year thinking, hey, this is a great place to start, that's where we want to be. So how do we see Texas doing against Alabama? Like I said, Cameron, cover your ears, because I don't think this is going to be a particularly close game. Having said that, Texas has got a mismatch problem in a Xavier Worthy. We know what Sark's going to do. He's going to move him around. I love Bama's DBs, but we know Sark's going to move Xavier Worthy around. They have some intriguing talent at running back. I mean, goodness gracious, Bijan Robinson, and at tight end. Here's the problem. We just talked about them needing an offensive line to come together and do something. You're taking on the scariest pass rush group in the nation. I don't say that lightly. I'm going to riddle this to you. If I said that the deepest group in the nation contained 2 5-stars as starters, 2 5-stars as backups, 3 5-stars as backups, I apologize, and then a ton of blue chip prospects outside of that, you'd probably say that's the deepest group in the nation. That's that outside linebacker group for Alabama. You got Will Anderson, Dallas Turner. You got Chris Broswell, Jeremiah Alexander, Jahad Campbell, Keanu Cott. I can keep going.
Quandarius Robinson.
That group is a problem, an absolute menace to society, and Texas has offensive line issues. As much as I think Quinn is going to be a great quarterback, I really do, because I got to see him play multiple times in high school, so I am a little bit biased there. I'll put that out completely. He's not mobile, right? Like, he's not a mobile guy that's going to be able to get away from that pass rush. It is absolutely insane what that pass rush is. So I don't see Texas being able to really contend with Alabama. And then when you look at the flip side, Texas has a lot of problems defensively, right? And someone said they're interested in what the Alabama wide receiver room is going to look like, right? Michael said that. Here's my thing to that, Michael. I think that what happened in the national championship could be a massive net positive in the long run. Sucks in the moment, but that was a major learning moment, right? That was a huge moment of learning for those wide receivers. We had a wide receiver on the team in Ajayi Hall that was very active on social media, and as second that game happened, he gets on social media, says, "That's my bad, I'll be back next year." Because he'd been airing his grievances on Twitter, the second he got on Twitter to say that to me was a major move in the right direction. Jance, what do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love Ajayi Hall to death, but I mean, we all can agree that he chirped a lot. He talked a big game, and I mean, I would too. I mean, you just had a dominant spring showcase. You've been dominating summer camp from what we've been hearing, and the fact that he never really got the opportunity, it sucks. But again, he had off the field issues. He didn't really do what was necessary for him, and it was a learning curve. And as soon as he got that opportunity in the national championship game, all of a sudden we're like, oh my God, we finally get to play. We finally get to see the athleticism, the verticality, the strength, the speed, the catch and traffic ability, and it never showcased at all in the national championship game. And so the fact that he responded that way, I think shows maturity. I think it shows that he's now going to believe in the process, and I think he will become a better player. And if he doesn't pan out, then you have Shaz Preston. If he doesn't pan out, you have Isaiah Bond. You have Ja'Cory Brooks. I mean, we can get JoJo Earl. I mean, we can keep going. Kobe Prentice. I mean, let's be. I mean, we can. Then it can keep going on and on and on. That's the thing. Whenever people say that they're concerned about this Alabama group, there's always someone that can step up and take their place. There's always someone that can take their place. Now, I would love for the 2023 season for more of our younger guys to get more experience. I think that killed us. That we did not get to see a lot of our younger guys play. I think that lack of experience hurt us. But
Yep.
with the amount of motivation going into 2022, with Alabama losing that national championship the way that they did, boy, I think that these receivers are going to have a phenomenal year. And not to mention, I think the most important part about this, guys, you get to establish that chemistry with Bryce Young. When you're sitting behind Jamison Williams and John Mechie and Slade Bolden, those guys there, none of those guys, they couldn't really get that chemistry. They couldn't really establish any form of continuity. That's happening now with Bryce Young. And I think that's only going to make Alabama way better than I think what they're going to do. That's why I believe that they will win the national championship for 2022.
Yeah, I agree. Now, before I answer this, I do have Eric. What point did Pate make last night? Love Josh Pate. The dude's always having phenomenal takes. Just interested to see what point he made last night. Matt Schnell comes in here, Texas fan. He says Texas 7-1-1 versus Alabama. Matt, I don't know that you're going to want to watch that game because I don't think y'all have a player that can get away from Will Anderson, not named Xavier Worthy or Bijan Robinson, because goodness gracious, that man, Will Anderson, was the second fastest player on the team in the 0 to 10 yard range, and that's when it included Jalen Waddle. That dude's a freak, right?
I mean, do you have anyone that can get away from DJ Dell and Justin Ogbogbe and who else were Byron Young, Timothy Smith in the trenches? We didn't even talk about the interior defensive line that everyone's returning back. Besides Fedarian Mathis, everyone's going to be back.
Everybody. But Fedarian Mathis is a big loss, man. He is.
That's a big loss. That is.
9 sacks from the interior. Someone has got to step up in that regard to replace that. Mathis is a big loss on the defensive line. Now, okay, I say big loss as in terms of like when we're talking who you could have lost out the defensive line, that was one of the names that if you could have kept, oh man, you'd have kept him in a heartbeat, an absolute heartbeat. So Isaiah, earlier I highlighted a comment. It's way up there earlier, but I do remember what you asked. You said, are there players in the class of 23 for Alabama we should keep our eye on? A whole lot. A whole lot. The state of Alabama absolutely loaded, whether it's players in the state or that have ties to the state. That's going to be a massive point to watch in this class. Peter Woods on the defensive line, James Smith from Alabama to IMG. IMG has a pipeline to Alabama anyways. So there's a lot of players we could talk about in the class of 23. I think, and this might be a bit bold. Chat, let me know if it's a bit bold. Jance, let me know if it's a bit bold. And hey, that's why I have the sign behind me so that my bias is out in front. And if I am coming off as biased, we can have an open conversation about it. No doubt, Kirby. Bama, any team is beatable. This is where it's interesting, though. I think that the 23 class for Alabama, if they're able to win the battles that they need to win, could be better than the 21 class for Alabama.
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. I mean, I will say this. I mean, when you have 6 5-stars in the state of Alabama alone, I mean, that's the most 5-stars that Alabama has ever had since 2008. And we all know what happened there.
State is loaded this year. And when you look at the positions they're winnable battles. 2 defensive linemen. Yeah. Bama didn't get the interior defensive line guys that they would have liked to out of this past class. Why are they not tripping about it? Because you fast forward to 2023. Okay, you got 2 5-star dudes, James Smith, Peter Woods. Huge, huge names. You look at the defensive back position. There are 3 5-star DBs in the state of Alabama. You missed Denver Harris, you missed Imani Jackson. That sucks. You get an Eli Ricks. There are 3 5-star DBs in the state of Alabama this year. That state is loaded, loaded, loaded. And then when you look at the players at like IMG, there's a 5-star quarterback Alabama's looking to get. There's 2 5-star quarterbacks Alabama's looking to get. Nicholas, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce his last name, and I want to be disrespectful and butcher it. I think it's Lamaleva. He's from California, very talented. And then Arch Manning. And then you have American Heritage, where Bama recruits very well. They get a cornerback coach with a relation to Florida. The offensive line coach that Alabama just got has stints in South Florida. He has a stint in the NFL. He has stints in Texas. So I think this 23 class for Bama is one we absolutely have to keep an eye on. Now, I think the last thing we'll pick a comment or two more before we head out. He said Eric said Pate was talking about define what it means to have a culture problem. He compared it to driving an e-brake on something just off, but the car is going. Like I said, man, Josh Pate doesn't miss. Like the guy, he doesn't miss. The dude, he's 100% right there. 100% right. Someone says if we include transfers, Alabama has a better class than Texas A&M, and an average rating is more of a point. So here's the thing, Garoon. I talked about this last year as it related to Oklahoma's class, and I do genuinely say this because I think it's true. Last year, Oklahoma had a class. If I'm not mistaken, Oklahoma fans, please correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I think your class came in at 13th last year, but you brought in 14 guys, 16 guys in the class. So it wasn't really a great representation of how good your class was when looking at other classes that were bringing in 24, 25, 26 guys. The average player rank was a more quantitative assessment of how good your class was. To Groon's point, Bama holds the number one class rank this year, which, by the way, guys, it's actually higher than the 21 class. That's something that's very interesting to see. Very interesting to see. Says Venables and Bates are trying to get into the state of Alabama. They can try. They can try.
Oh, they can try.
And they should try. And they should try. Like, no doubt about it. They should try. They will try. They can try. Very hard to recruit the state of Alabama. Super, you asked who decommitted. It was DeAndre Moore, wide receiver out of California, Los Alamitos, if I'm not mistaken, teammate of Malachi Nelson. 4-star wide receiver in the class of 2023, comes in at the number 48 prospect overall, number 4 wide receiver on top 24/7, number 5 wide receiver in the composite as well. Mr. John says Valai will too. John, I'm not going to lie. Valai's a good coach, but if we're talking T-Rob versus Jay Valai and the battles for the players for Alabama, those cornerback battles, T-Rob is, I think, definitely has an edge. Not only because he's been able to recruit better, but also because now he has Saban as well. Valai is going to be recruiting very well, but we also have to understand you're going into Alabama trying to take a DB away from Saban, and he just had a great hire at the DB coach. That's
not just them, but Auburn. I said not just them, but you got to compete against Auburn. You have to compete against Clemson, which Clemson is probably the only school, maybe outside of Alabama, that does a really good job of recruiting that state. There's a lot of competitors. There's a lot of people that you have to kind of compete with.
Venables and Bates are going to be in the state of Alabama because they've had that success at Clemson. Yeah. They could have that success. Don't worry. Like, none of this is a shot at anybody at OU. Y'all know what I think about that staff. Great. We also know how hard it is to lift a player out the state of Alabama. We also know how hard that is. He says Bates and Brandon Hall are the key for Alabama recruiting. It is going to be interesting to see. Absolutely. Why can't Wario put together a staff at Miami? I think expectations, Eric, and I know that might sound like a weird answer. Jance, do you get what I mean when I say that?
I think I see where you're kind of going with this. Like, are you trying to say, like, as far as expectations goes, is that there's just going to be kind of too much on the plate?
I think when you're trying to revamp a program like Miami,
it's the blue butt program.
You have so much pressure that, like, trying to piece together a staff, if it's not perfect, it's bad, right? Like, and like that expectation is crazy. So it is going to be crazy wild how this goes. Kirby's visor says Miami just lost arguably its best recruiter to UGA and Brian McClendon. You're not wrong, because when McClendon was on,
big loss.
That's a huge loss, bro. Huge loss. You remember what McClendon did whenever he was with Georgia the first time around? I mean, stacked names in that class. Absolutely stacked names in that class. But Kirby, not only do they lose McClendon, they also lose the cornerback coach as well, who's been able to recruit and develop very well for them. So Texas Rocks says Texas got Justice Finkley out of Alabama. They absolutely did, and Alabama pushed, but you also have to realize he was about to be a part of the deepest room in college football. So
Yeah,
you get what I'm saying, Jance? If you're going to lose a player,
and he also he really wasn't I mean, Saban was pushing for him, but he wasn't a top guy. Like if we would have lost Justin Finkley, I mean, he's a good player.
That's because they prioritized Jahad Campbell.
Exactly. They did.
But Finkley is a beast. I cannot wait to see what he does at Texas. Super smart kid as well. Bama would have been over the moon to have him. But when you look at the perspective Texas Rocks, it's very understandable he choose Texas where they're utilizing those Jack and X linebacker positions. Really unique. Very key to that defense. Whereas at Alabama, man, you literally have to be the second coming of Lawrence Taylor at this point to see time over Will Anderson or Dallas Turner. Like you got to be a freak to do that. Those dudes, if we combine it, what was it at? I mean, you're talking 26 sacks, 27 sacks this year between the two of them.
Okay. Yeah. So Anderson had 16.5. Turner had 9.5. No, he had 8.5. So that would be.
Texas,
I think you're right. Yeah.
Smart for Alabama. Right. Hey, Greg McElroy was accepted into Harvard. I'm just going to say that. Hey, this is NFLU. This is NFLU. But, guys, with that, Jance, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, not that much. I'll just say this, man, is that I think that for the most part, we have signing day that's going to come up. I don't think Alabama's going to make that huge of a splash unless it's going to be in the transfer portal. But I'm excited. I'm excited to see what's going on with the Oklahoma-Texas battle for DeAndre Campbell. I'm very excited to see that. I'm excited to hear some more transfer news, especially with Caleb Williams, the potential of him going to Wisconsin. I mean, I don't think that's going to happen, but I mean, we've seen crazier stuff that has. So I'm excited, man. This is a very exciting time for college football. I understand that, we got no more football to play, but with the transfer portal coming up now, that's a 24/7 cycle. That's something that we always have to kind of stay in depth with. So for the most part, man, I'm really excited to see what's going to be happening with the offseason. There's going to be a lot of drama going on up until we get into September.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason, I'll put it like this. We'd have taken Justice Finkley in a heartbeat, no doubt. But it wasn't his size why I think a lot of people were just like, okay, well, this is a miss, but a miss we can stomach. It's because of the room that he would have been a part of, right? It's a miss. I think all Bama fans will admit it's a miss because he's a talented dude.
Yeah.
Texas's point, brilliant guy, really smart. So it is a miss, but it's a miss that you look at and you're like, okay, well, we got Dallas Turner, Will Anderson, 2 5-stars, Chris Braswell, the number 2 edge rusher in his class, Jeremiah Alexander, the number 1 edge rush in his class, Jahad Campbell, the number 2 edge rush in his class. That room, man, it's wild. It is absolutely wild.
And Jason just said it. He just said it too in a minute there. The Curtis Perry and Justice Finkley were 2 guys that Alabama wanted, and if you could just land either one of them, you were straight. If you couldn't land Justice Finkley, it's not the end of the world. You have Curtis Perry.
Yeah, and to Texas's point, Texas, y'all got a guy in Justice Finkley. There's no doubt about that. Can't wait to see how he does for Texas. I'm going to be rooting for him. So, guys, with that, Eric says we need to go live more. We're going to go live more, Eric. We're going to be going live after National Signing Day to talk about all of that. But that's it for this live stream. We will see y'all soon. With that, see ya.